When we start a presentation at Railroads University, we find it very important to acknowledge the traditional lens that we're on. So I invite you, maybe you can take a deep breath and just connect your feet to the ground and think of the traditional lens that you're joining us from today. I'm so lucky to be on campus in Colwood at Railroads University, and we are located on the traditional lands of the Lekwungen and Kosapsen indigenous families and nation, also known as the Sanghi and Esquimalt. So it's really with deep gratitude that we live, learn, work, play here on those lands where the present and future of indigenous and non-indigenous people come together. If you know the traditional lands that you're joining us from today, please enter it in the chat. It's always wonderful to know where you're coming from. And we have people joining us from everywhere in the world today. So welcome again. Thank you for being with us. And we're here to talk about the Master of Arts and Graduate Diploma in Climate Action Leadership. I'm so pleased and lucky to be with Dr. Robin Cox. Hi, Robin.
Hi everyone.
It's nice to be here, and I'm Nancy Prévost-Maurice. I'm an education specialist here, and I'm also a student in this program. So I kind of have a double hat today, talking about the program and assisting Robin in delivering the information. And I really want to say a big thank you for people behind the scene. I have my colleague Ariana, and we have people from enrollment services as well. So people will be adding some links as we go through into the presentation. Thank you for everybody using the chat. Please let us know. Anything you need to communicate with us, use the chat. Quick agenda for us today. I'll talk briefly about Railroads University. I know many of you are keen to learn more about the institution. We'll talk about the program-specific information. We'll talk about application process, and we welcome your question as we go through the presentation. And as you might remember, we will be using Mentimeter. So we will ask you a few questions in a few minutes to get the session going and get your feedback here too. And using the reaction buttons, the little feature there, maybe you can let me know if some of you came to campus before, some people know Railroads already. I hope so. So why explore Railroads University? So why would you pick our institution when there's so many institutions in the world? So a few bullet points for you here. We see life as a qualification. We'll talk about it at the end of the presentation, but what we do for admission is pretty unique. So we have different type of admission because we want to see you as a whole. So everything you have done in the past, in the present, and where you want to go really matters here from day one when you apply at Railroads. Prof, we know your name. That's very true. As I said, I'm a student here. I know that. So instructors and students really work together, learn together as we go and move through the courses. So at Railroads, you're not just a number. It's not like lecture style with like 200 people in a big lecture hall, one-way education. It's really bi-directional. So people really connect with each other and know your name. Learning based on life, what you do in your workplace, maybe all those challenges or real life challenges, you can bring them into the classroom and talk about them with your colleagues and your professors. So it's really bringing theory and practice together. Connection for Life, we have a beautiful network of thousands of alumni everywhere in the world. And those people now hire our students. So there's a nice connection there. And people you meet in the cohort, even if it's online learning, you will really bond with those people and most likely continue to connect with each other after the program. We were built differently. So we have been created in 1995 and we always taught online. So it's always that kind of very differently built teaching and learning model that we have been doing since day one. This is not something we had to pivot to in the past years. It's something we have been doing since day one. So our instructors are really good at it. And a few pictures here of campus. I know the program we'll talk about is mostly online, but maybe you come here for vacation this summer, or you come say hi on campus. So on the top left, we have Hatley Castle, which is the most iconic building we have here at Railroad. So it appears in many, many movies, built in 1908. Behind it, you can see the Esquimalt Lagoon, and it's also the picture on the bottom left. Love Esquimalt Lagoon. It's a bird sanctuary. We can go there at lunchtime, walk there. If you were ever to study on campus, you can go there to do some homework, very peaceful. On the top right, we have some trails. We have 565 acres of trails, so you can run, bike, do so much outside. And at the bottom right, we can see online learning, as I mentioned. So it's really something we do really well. If you have some experience of online learning before, I know I do with another institution years ago, and it was very different. It was not as engaging as what we do at Railroad. So I hope you can test it out. And we are a changemaker campus. When you have a minute, you can Google Ashoka U. So we're only a few institutions in North America to have that designation, and it's all about leadership, entrepreneurship, social innovation. So we're very proud of that accreditation here. And I know maybe, Robin, I'll ask you to talk about that slide a little bit. And I know many people had questions about what is climate action at Railroads, because we are a climate action campus.
Yeah, thanks, Nancy. And again, hello, everyone who's there and has been entering over the last couple of minutes. Yeah, so Royal Roads over the last 2-3 years, a little bit more, developed a very robust climate action plan, and it includes both mitigation, so reducing greenhouse gas emissions and working to get to net zero or neutral zero or a neutral carbon stance. And then also doing adaptation. A lot of the work, of course, is around education and building awareness. And so really climate change and climate action, which includes both those sides, mitigation and adaptation, is infused in the work that we do at Royal Roads. It's a priority at Royal Roads, and it really is looking at how we as an educational institution, as a post-secondary institution, can contribute to Canada's climate resilience, but ultimately to global climate resilience through our students and our faculty and the many, many, many circles of influence that flow from them. So you'll see the URL here. You can check out the climate action plan. It's an iterative plan, and it's growing and being implemented in stages as we speak.
Thank you so much. That's fantastic. And I think if that's okay with you, Robin, we'll move to Mentimeter, and I'll try to connect the link as well for the climate action plan so people can click on it. And so if you want to open a new browser or maybe use your phone now, you can scan that QR code that will lead you right to Mentimeter. Or you can go to menti.com and enter the code here to get into the session. And do not worry, I will start sharing my screen and you will see the code again, just in case you haven't grabbed it yet. So here we go. So let's start as you get into the room, into the Mentimeter. Using that menti.com, you have a code here, 17537382. And our first question, Robin, is using just one word, describe your feeling regarding climate change. So I'll give everyone a few seconds as we create that beautiful cloud.
Urgency, I think, is there for most people. Commitment, and that's such a huge thing. Yeah, of course, as an educational institution, we think education is super important. I just was reading an article the other day looking at the most recent IPCC report, and it's emphasized there as well that one of the key tasks of governments and ultimately institutions like ours is around education and awareness building. So that underpins capacity building, which is what we need. Yeah, disruptive. Yeah, I don't know that people understand just how disruptive it is going to be. It already is, but yes, I think there's growing awareness, certainly in governments, around how disruptive climate change is going to be to all our systems, economic, political, social, cultural, and this is, and obviously environmental. So this is really why there is such urgency, and I see urgency growing as more people sort of add to that.
Yeah, wonderful. And let's move to the next question we have here. Briefly describe your motivation for attending today's webinar on MACAL. And when we say MACAL, it's the Master of Arts in Climate Action Leadership. That's something we do really well at Royal Road, the acronym, so we call it MACAL. So what are your intentions for the session today?
People have different motive, and we don't have to linger on Menti if folks aren't interested in using it. But people are motivated for in different ways for attending and participating in graduate education. And we hear this a lot from all our programs. Some it's really around advancing in a particular career or particular job. Another one is, you see this is like really understanding what, in this case, around the program, what is understanding the program itself and what it encompasses and the kind of flavor or culture of it. See, exploring future career, exactly. And we'll talk, somebody in the question, I think it was Jyoti, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, asked about job prospects, and we will talk about that later in the webinar. We see this growing exponentially every week without exaggeration. When we first started the program, there were a trickle of jobs on the adaptation side, more on the green energy transition, but now every week there's more and more jobs at municipal governments, federal, provincial governments, NGOs, banks, etc. So we'll definitely talk about that more as we go in.
And one last question for all of us, and I'll make sure to share those results and those answers with us after the webinar. Please describe how climate change is impacting your life and how you see yourself engaging professionally in climate action. And I love that question, Robin, because I think as students, that's often something we have to reflect on.
Yeah. Well, and I think, for many of us, and I know people attending here are from all over, so this may or may not be true, but I know for myself, living where I live, in Canada, on the West Coast, in a city, it can be easy to not really think about climate change. Not for me, because I'm so focused on it, but for a lot of people, it's there may be an extreme weather event, but generally people may not be thinking about it, even though it's in the news all the time. But I think what we're seeing now is that everyone is being affected, and some may be affected directly through having lived. I mean, we certainly had the big atmospheric river a couple of years ago, the heat dome, where people were everyone was affected, and over 600 people died. So we're having events like that, but I think it's also filtering into jobs. I'm just building a course for Environment Climate Change Canada for public sector workers, to bring them up to some level of climate literacy around climate adaptation. So I think this is starting to infiltrate all jobs, and it will need to do that. I see, Jay, you're attending, you have a retail job, and exactly, sort of, some people go like, why would retail care about climate change? We have a student that comes from the fashion industry, for example, currently in the program. And it's about, how do you contribute in these spaces to, furthering our climate goals around reducing and eliminating carbon emissions and greenhouse gas emissions? How do you look for opportunities to create new ways of operating in the world, and new systems and new ways of thinking about what it means to be in retail or tourism or planning, etc.? Yeah, and I see, climate change is a driver for quite a few people rethinking their careers. Certainly a lot of young people are, I was just listening to another webinar where talking about how much more concerned young people are than older people. And I think it's true. Obviously, you see a future ahead that is, impacted so heavily by climate change, and thinking about what does that mean to me as a student? What does that mean to me in terms of the careers I choose? And we always say that every career will be every career, every sector is going to be impacted by climate change, and we'll have to incorporate things like climate adaptation planning, reducing risks, addressing and assessing what those risks are, and reducing GHG emissions, so our carbon footprint. Yeah.
Yeah, I see as well, Robin, making it a stronger lifestyle and vocabulary and ongoing conversation in my life and career.
Mm. Yeah, creating a culture of climate action strategies. Beautifully said. Yes, we do. It is a culture shift. Yeah. And I think many of us want to, looking at that last comment, would want to make this planet better, want to make a future that we want to live in, that we want our kids and grandkids and their grandkids to live in. And, you know, there are so many ways to be doing that. And so many demands for doing it, really.
Thank you, everyone, for participating. We'll go back to the
So
yeah, go ahead. Thank you.
yeah, thanks, Nancy. So hi, I'm Robin, and I'm the program head for the as Nancy said, we call it McCall, the MA and the Graduate Diploma in Climate Action Leadership here at Royal Roads. I've been working here at Royal Roads since 2007, since 2009 full time, and a lot of my work over the previous 10 years was in the Disaster and Emergency Management Program. And then I worked to create this climate action leadership program based on this increasing awareness and understanding of how climate change was impacting us, and this increasing need for leadership in this area, not just political leadership, but leadership in all sectors, in all ways. And so that's how the program came into being. Lots of students ask, like, who is this program for and who's in the program? And we have people, first of all, it's for, it's easy to say it's for everyone, but it really is. Climate action leadership will need to be engaged in every sector, whether you're coming from the sciences, biology, or environmental field, etc., or even, some of these others, places like meteorology. And also in the social sciences, because there's going to be enormous social and economic and cultural impacts of climate change. And the solutions are going to also have that blend of science and social science. So we've got people working with and within Indigenous communities, students who are Indigenous and those who are not. People working in education, whether that's in formal places like post-secondary institutions or in community ways through education, K-12 system. We have entrepreneurs. I mentioned we have a student that's in the fashion industry, but we have other entrepreneurs, people who are involved with in municipalities, and that might be in planning. It can be in community development. It's in multiple areas, or finance. There are grassroots activists. This is not a program designed for activists, but a lot of activists understand that being on the front line of activism is absolutely important, and they also need other ways for influencing the changes that we need, careers as well. We've got government employees, and really it is designed for government employees at every level, whether it's municipal or federal or provincial or territorial. Folks coming in with already some connections into issues and topics that are related to climate, things like energy systems and financial systems, healthcare systems, and of course, people coming from more of an environmental and natural resources area. And there's a lot of that kind of intersection. So we have students from a broad range of sectors, and we are encouraging a broad range of sectors. It's really that diversity and that transdisciplinarity that is one of the richnesses of the program. Richnesses, I don't think that's a word. The richness of the program, because you're really bringing in different perspectives and having those conversations that cross those sectors, those silos that we have created as a society. But we don't live in silos. We live in a world, and we live embodied in a world. And, I have to think about economics. I have to think about social aspects. I have to think about the built environment. So really, we have that richness in the program. these are just some, made up examples based on reality. But, again, it's really important that people can see themselves in a program and sort of understand what that mix of students and mix of goals and objectives might be. So, meet Marie. She's coming to the program with a college diploma in environmental practice, and so she's got already as familiar and doing some work probably in the environmental area. She wants to advance her career and her current job, and she recognizes that this is an opportunity to bring more climate-related concern into her existing work. Obviously, this is a critical area in environmental practice. And she's not sure that she wants to do a full master's, so she takes the diploma and then decides while she's in the diploma to carry on and do the master's degree. And because there are some options in the second year of the program, and we'll talk more about that later, she decides to take the internship route because she wants to gain some experience outside of her current work, working with climate more, so that she can bring that into what she does, or potentially, shift into a different job. Olena has been a climate activist. And as I said, many people are coming to this work from that frontline activism, and it's not about letting that go necessarily, but complementing it. She wants to bring that work and passion to an actual career and getting paid, paying the bills. And so she takes the master's program, and through that and through her own connections, she gets a job at a non-governmental organization, a not-for-profit. And she gets that before the program. And we are seeing that with our first cohort. Nancy can attest to this. Students are already getting, they haven't completed the master's degree, they're already getting jobs because there's this pent-up demand for people who have an understanding of climate and climate science and climate change and adaptation and what to do. And so Olena decides that she's going to do a research thesis in year 2. She has a particular topic that she wants to explore and that she's really passionate about, and she's going to do a deep dive into that topic through doing primary research on it. And then we've got Brian. He lives in an urban context. He's an entrepreneur. He's working in the hospitality sector, and he's wanting to make the hospitality sector, the sector that he's in, the sector that he's passionate about, that he anticipates having a career in for if not life, then for a long time, to make that a greener, more adaptive sector, with thinking about things like circular economy and thinking about things like how do we help hospitality sector reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and how do we help adapt to the many changes that are happening in the environment and in the social context. So again, he takes the master's program and he's going on to do the second year, and he chooses another option that's available in the second year, which is experiential learning, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. But it's a different way. All of these second years, the internship, the research thesis, the experiential learning, are allowing the students to do a customized deep dive into areas that they are passionate about that relate to climate action leadership. So a little bit more about the program. Now, right now, the program delivery is blended, and that means that most of it is online, but there are some face-to-face opportunities. I'm telling you folks right now that, and you'll see this in a slide later, that we are, first of all, we've only ever delivered the program fully online because of COVID. And in consulting with existing students and other stakeholders and rights holders, we have made the decision to move it into a fully online program. And again, I can talk a bit about that and answer some questions. It makes sense. A lot of students talked about the barrier to traveling at this time where it's very expensive. It's, it's very expensive to get here to Victoria, but it's also very expensive to find accommodation here. Post-COVID, it's been very difficult. And there's, as you know, everywhere, housing and accommodation shortage. And so the prices have gone up astronomically, actually. So there's that, but we're also a climate action leadership program, and there's a commitment to saying, how do we not contribute to climate change? And one of the ways we don't contribute to climate change is by, is trying not to fly or flying less. This is still pending and will be approved. So you'll see on the websites that it is still listed as blended. What this means, though, is it changes the nature of the engagement, but it does not change the depth of engagement. So we will have a learning intensive. It's a 10-day full-time It is in other programs, it's been called residencies because students are resident to campus. We call it learning intensive. It is the only time, other than at the very end of the program, that you are full-time engaged. Most of the time, it's a lighter touch. So it will be full-time. It's 10 days online. And Nancy, maybe you can talk about your experience of the online intensive. I think some people get worried that it's going to be it's not going to be engaging, or they're not going to get to know their cohort and their peers. Do you want to just share a bit?
Yeah, very true. And the fact that we have a cohort from all across Canada, I was scared myself. I'm like, how do we bound? How do we get to know each other in an online context? But no, it went super well. I think after 2 weeks, we were quite aware of each other. And yeah, the fact that you are off work and then you just for 2 weeks, you really immerse yourself into the content, I think was a really beautiful way to start the program. And then you go kind of on your own from home, doing like one course at a time. But the intensive, thanks to you, Robin, and everybody in the program, it's so different. The courses are so different too during the intensive that we touch base on so many things that sometimes we're like, wow, that's a lot. And sometimes it's like, okay, this feels good. So I think it was a nice way to really connect with all of us, with the cohort. And then after, when we do the 2 years, even if we haven't met in person, we know each other quite well. And I think we started some channel like Slacks, and all those group kind of form on in a virtual way.
Yeah, thanks, Nancy. And so this learning intensive is a deep dive. It is full-time. I mean, you're not on the screen full-time, don't worry. We come back and we'll say, okay, take the next 2 hours and do this, and then come back. But it is very engaged, and the learning is very much designed for both the learning and the engagement and building a sense of a cohort, with activities and with conversations and dialogue, etc. Some students did decide to come to Victoria in the fall following the learning intensive, and that was wonderful. It was wonderful to meet people, and we'll talk. Once the program starts, we'll talk about options for if students want to come to campus, how they can do it. It's still going to be online, but they could gather in a breakout room, and we can book that on campus. It's a beautiful campus, let's face it. But it is also hard for people who are working, who have kids, who have other obligations, to take 2 weeks out of their lives and come to campus. So anyways, it's moving towards fully online, and it will be by the 2024 intake fully online. The remainder, as Nancy said, the remainder of the program, which is the bulk of the program, is online. It's mostly asynchronous. So again, in these courses, other than the learning intensive, most of your time will be asynchronous, which just means you can schedule when you do the readings, when you do the assignments, when you do all of the work of the thing. There will always be synchronous sessions within the course, again, to bring in those dialogues, to be able to engage with the instructor and with each other. There will be team learning where you engage either through our platforms or through your own, like Slack or some other back channel. So the expectation is around 15 to 20 hours a week. You only do one course at a time most of the time, and there's a little qualifier there. We're using WordPress and Moodle, and those are learning management systems as Moodle. WordPress is about open learning, and this is really, we'll give you the links to the McCall website where you can see all the courses. You can see what the assignments are. You can see what the readings are. You can see all of that. You don't have to wait to be registered to get a feel for what the courses are going to be and what the content is going to be. And to us, that's really important because for one, I think open learning and Creative Commons licensing of things is a culture that is a good culture. And also because in this space, we don't have time to what I would call hide our homework. We need to be sharing with each other what we're doing and how we're doing it because of the urgency of the climate crisis. We also have lots of computer help through our computer help desk. So it's not like you'll be left on your own. Also embedded in the learning intensive, we get one of our key learning designers to come in and talk through how to work in WordPress and how to work with that. And there is a pre-program course called Connections that also does some of that. All right.
And I think to add to this one, Robin, we also work with a team coach, which is something I never heard from other institutions, and that's pretty cool.
Yes. Yeah. So, in not in all courses, but in most courses, there will be teamwork. It's part of the learning, teaching, research model at Royal Roads, the orientation to learning. There's such value in doing things as a team. And yes, I know most of us think, oh God, teams, they're hard to work in, and they can be hard to work in, but there's also rich learning from that. And again, in this field, in the climate field, teams are a core part of it. There's no work really that can be done and done well where it's one person. Part of it is the interdisciplinarity of it. Part of it is that, you're going to have multiple stakeholders and right holders' concerns. So developing those muscles of working in teams that may function beautifully and teams that may function less beautifully, is really a part of the work and the learning. And we have a team coach for that reason, so that the team coach can support you doing that or navigating if a team is struggling for whatever reason. It's actually one of the cool things at Royal Roads is there's a lot of support for students, much more than in many institutions. Yeah, we have student services, which most universities have, but we bring a lot of that support into the programs as well. All right, program outcomes. I'm not going to read this slide, but you will build knowledge, skills, and mindsets in a range of areas. This program was designed intentionally as transdisciplinary, which has its own meaning, but it really brings together different disciplines to inform and change each other. You're going to understand climate science, not as a climate scientist, but as a social science. You'll understand enough of it that when somebody says something, you think, okay, I know what that means. You'll also understand enough of it to be able to work with it a bit and say, you know what, we need this kind of model, or, oh, I see that they've based this on this climate scenario. It's really important to have that grounding because you will be working in spaces many times with people that don't have it and will be looking to you for leadership in that area. We look at climate communication, critical part of climate action. There's so much work to be done in helping bring other people along, communicating where you're at, what you're doing, etc. And so climate communication is another component. We do a couple of dives into risk and resilience, and we do that again because a lot of the work, especially on the adaptation side, but it's also true on the mitigation side, is around understanding the hazards, the risks, vulnerabilities, and being able to plan for resilience through adaptation actions. We look at the business side because, again, in many contexts, whether you're working in a corporation or an institution like Royal Roads, you're working in a community, we're still at the place with this that we are having to make financial arguments, business arguments, not only financial, but business arguments for why climate action, an adaptation strategy, a mitigation strategy are important and fit within the context of whatever that organization is doing for their business. So you have to be able to frame out an argument for why something is important and needs to be enacted. We use a design thinking lens in various places in the program. It's a creative problem-solving method that really engages with multiple perspectives and really looks at an emergent way of designing solutions. Change leadership, also critical, and really being able to bring others along. Anytime there's change within an organization or a community or wherever, family, there's going to be resistance. So how do you lead change in that context? And you'll also develop, and we've touched on some of this, but like research literacy, you'll look at knowledge mobilization and how you share information out. Every student in the program is given a WordPress blog site, in part to, again, craft those skills about how do you communicate out what you're learning and craft it for other audiences. How do you share what you're learning? And how do you engage in that larger community of climate action folks, whether they're working in government or in communities, etc. So these are some of the things that you will learn in this. Is there space for somebody who is interested in the financing side of climate action? Absolutely. You probably do really well in the business, on the business course, but also bringing that lens into other areas. So like when you look at adaptation, or when you look at a program development, you need to have that lens. So this is one of the ways in which the richness of having people come from different disciplinary areas and different sectors really is what is needed in the climate space. What's sort of the culture of the program? And some of this is true for really every program at Royal Roads, but I'll frame it out for this program, which is cohort model. This is not you. At many universities, you take courses, you get to know people in courses, but you don't have a group of people you're moving through a program with. Here we do that, and we do that for a lot of different reasons. One is that social learning, and there's lots of research on this, social learning, engaging with each other, is one of the strongest forms of learning. It's also one of the most gratifying. It also means that during the program, you are developing your professional networks with each other, with faculty, with guest speakers. And so you're emerging from the program with those professional networks. And again, I was saying earlier that some of the students in the first cohort that are now in their second year of the program are already getting snapped up for jobs. Part of that is these networks that you're building. So that's the cohort model. We are very student-centered. There is a lot of focus on not just on student support, but in this program around customization. In the first year, you will all take the same courses, but in the second year, there are different pathways, and we'll talk about those pathways. And that's an intentional choice to say, A, people learn differently. People need different things in their career and wherever they're at in their career stage, and people have different things that they're interested in doing. Climate action is what we would call a distributed field because it touches on every sector. There are an infinite number of ways to focus your attention. You can't do it all. So where do you want to take a deep dive and start crafting your expertise? Very much grounded, the program and the courses are very much grounded in the social justice and equity lens. And this is so huge a part of climate. We have to be addressing climate change through this social justice and equity lens. We know that climate-like disasters affect certain populations more than others, not through any fault of their own, but because of the way they're positioned economically. So poverty is a huge thing. Gender, geographic location, the global south, the Arctic are all experiencing this way, the early impacts way more than in other places. So that lens is really critical. I talked a little bit about open learning. This is this idea, again, that the program is as open as it can be. Yes, there are things that are going to be behind a firewall, like your assignments and your grading and the feedback from instructors. But most of what we do is outward facing, and it's outward facing for that intentional idea of sharing learning, getting used to being able to navigate and communicate in those spaces around climate. And then finally, hands-on. There are a number of hands-on experiences. In each course, there are some hands-on experiences, but we also have an internship, we have applied research, and we have this experiential learning in the second year. So you can get practice with these things in the courses and also in these choices that you will make in the second year, depending on your learning style, depending on other demands on your time and just your interests. So I'll let somebody else answer the tuition question. Yeah, I'll try and look at that, but Nancy, you can also let me know if there's a question about something I've just said. So the other thing that we've done, and we continue to do, this continues to evolve, is to try and create different pathways for students. And I've talked about a couple of them. So before you even enter into the program, there are different ways you can enter. You can apply and come into the program. I mean, you have to, everyone has to do that, but you can come in with learning in advance. You may decide, we have at Royal Roads right now, we have climate adaptation micro-credential, and we're trying to expand those offerings so that there's different micro-credentials. This is a new space. You can do that micro-credential. It's not for credit learning, but we've designed it, and I and a team in my the lab that I run, the Resilience by Design lab, designed it so that it is equivalent to 3 credits, so that you can bring it into the program for credit in the second year, depending on which pathway you choose. There's also graduate certificates. One of the new ones is this climate risk and resilience graduate certificate that will begin being offered in the fall of September. It is in fact it consists of 3 of the courses that are in the program. So for a student that says, I'm going to do that graduate certificate starting in September, you would bring those credits into the program. When those courses are happening in the program, that opens up space to do some other things. And we can talk about what those would be when we get to the more detailed stuff. And you can also bring in what we call prior learning and assessment. And it's often recognition. There's an R missing. So it's often called PLAR, prior learning and assessment recognition. So as Nancy said at the very top, we look at students in their entirety and say, you know, you're not coming in as a blank slate. You may have done things in this space or that are relevant to this space that you want to say, hey, I've done this. Would this count towards credit in the program? That will be assessed, and there's a formal mechanism for doing that. But these are things that you can bring into the program so that you may already have credits towards your degree. If you choose to do the graduate diploma, it's an 18-credit graduate diploma. It provides a pathway into the master's should you choose to do that. It's a contained credential in of itself. So some students come and say, you know what, I already have a master's degree, or I don't need one right now, but I want to do the diploma. So that is basically the first year of the program. Or you can do the full master's, which is the completion of the degree with these options in the second year for pathways for how you complete the degree. So talk a bit about these pathways. In the first year, you're a cohort, you're all doing the same courses. In the second year, we are working to maintain that sense of cohort, even though students are going to choose different pathways. So Cal 601, Leading Climate Action in Society, Part 2, is about doing that. So it provides a space for students to maintain that sense of cohort with their peers, to be able to continue to engage in dialogue, whether they're doing a thesis or they're doing an internship or they're doing electives, so that they can still come together. In addition to Cal 601, you're going to choose a stream, and this is far down the road for any of you, but one is the pathway for somebody who wants to do a primary research project, a master's thesis. That's kind of a more traditional route in master's programs. And it's a way to deepen your expertise by conducting primary research on a topic that is of passion and interest to you, relevance to you. You can also do the practitioner scholar route, and that has a more customized thing that we'll talk about in a bit, because there's a personalized learning portfolio, and we'll talk about what that personalized learning portfolio is. It consists of a number of options. So thesis is one. The portfolio option will have, if you decide you want to do internships, say you've never done any work in the space that touches on climate, or perhaps you're working in a space, you're working in the retail sector, and you think, yeah, I'd really like to get into government, or I'd like to get into an NGO that works with young people. So you're going to craft an internship, and you get a lot of support from student services and the program to set that internship up. And ideally a paid internship, although not all of them are. So you will do an internship prep course and the internship, and then you will also have space to do an elective. It'll either be Cal 603, which is about climate resilience, so a lot of students will choose that, or it may be experiential learning, and that is a kind of a bucket where you can design your learning, you can customize it, and can consist of things like MOOCs and webinars and being mentored by somebody and doing a bit of a deep dive into the literature. So it's a really flexible course that is customized to what you want to do. And it's customized in collaboration with a faculty supervisor and the program head, myself. The other option is to do a portfolio without an internship, and that's 9 credits that you can customize. One option is to do a graduate certificate, which is a 9-credit graduate certificate. You can do approved electives, and there's a wide range of electives. We've got a big, long list of them covering different areas of business, finance, a deeper dive into leadership, a deeper dive into some environmental topics, a deeper dive into communication. So there's a lot of electives you can choose from. And then again, you can also choose this the climate action experiential learning, which is this customizable container for how you want to do your learning and what you want to do. Obviously, it has to be relevant, it has to be approved, but it really allows for a lot of flexibility in how you will do, you will accomplish those 9 credits.
And Robin, if I may jump in, I think someone is asking, when do we need to choose the path? If I recall, we can kind of do that 1 year, and then as we discuss with you and other people, then we make our decision.
So in the first year, there will be a sort of an information session on the streams or the pathways, and you'll learn about those. And then you'll have quite a long chunk of time until basically close to the end of the first year and close to the end of the diploma to decide which stream or pathway you're going to choose. And so you may say, I'm going to do thesis. If you do thesis, there's a little application process. It's not like a big deal, but you have to just sort of frame out a project that you think you'd like to do, a research project that you think you'd like to do. When you choose, you're not completely locked in either. You might say, you know what, I'm going to choose portfolio with internship. I've just been talking to a student with this, and they haven't quite decided whether they want to do internship. They think they might have one, but they're not. So it's like there's a lot of flexibility. There are obviously deadlines, but most of that decision will happen towards the end of the first year. And then depending on which pathway you choose, there may even be some pending decision in the second year as you refine that, as you try and figure out what internship, where, or what that 9 credit bucket is going to look like. So and you're supported along the way. You'll be in conversation with me, you'll be in conversation with the program office, etc., to try and make those decisions. I hope that answers your question. Somebody asked early on in this thing about employment. I mean, this is a really valid and important question, and lots of people come to do a master's because they want different employment, or they want employment that pays better, or whatever. When I first started thinking about this program, there were climate jobs, for sure, there were still out there, but I knew that they would increase as climate change increases, and as awareness and as governments and funding started to cotton on to the fact that we need to be doing something. We have seen exponential growth in this area. This is just a very small slice, and I think, Nancy, you have you can put in the chat a link to a Google Doc that gives more information on, I think it's about 13 jobs. Those jobs were found one day looking at Indeed, just saying, okay, what's out there today? Every day there are new jobs, and these jobs touch on things like, people looking for, somebody asked about finance. It's like there's a huge need for people looking at in banking and financial sectors about reporting on GHG emissions and investments, etc. Looking at creating new jobs and requiring, what the requirements are in new jobs in finance in terms of understanding mitigation, but also adaptation. Every bank, every organization that has an accountant is going to have to be thinking, it's like, okay, what does climate change mean to our bottom line? How do we adjust? What do we need to do? Climate mitigation jobs touch on energy systems. So I'm sure heard about green energy and the energy transition that we talk about in Canada, from our reliance on carbon intensive energy to clean energy. Looking at renewables, looking at sustainable transportation, planning for the sustainable use of forests and water, looking at education and accounting and planning in all sectors. A lot of climate adaptation jobs that shifted. Really, the emphasis has been on climate mitigation, on emissions reductions in the employment sector, and there's still a large emphasis on that. I would say in the last 2 years that the other side of it, the climate adaptation side, has mushroomed, and in part it's because at the federal level, say here in Canada, at the federal level, we now have a national adaptation strategy. It just came out last fall. Most provinces and territories, not all, have adaptation policies and plans. All will have to have it. At the municipal level as well, cities, many of them have done this, but everyone's going to have to do this, is creating their own adaptation strategies and plans. So the number of jobs in adaptation has grown hugely. And that was true last year. It's true, even more true this year. We're seeing things like that adaptation specialists. We're seeing people being called to, manage adaptation programs. We're seeing education and awareness programs around adaptation, other capacity building activities. This down here talks about the flood risk. Flood risk is a huge part of, it's a huge risk for Canada and globally. Flood risk alone estimated to result in an additional 25,000 plus direct and 12,000 plus indirect jobs by 2030. That's just in one, related to one hazard. And that's probably a conservative estimate. It's a huge thing here in Canada, not only coastal flooding. So we've got three coasts to manage, but also overland flooding. There's going to be additional impacts on the employment sector, where people are focusing on job losses, like job losses in the oil and gas sector, for example, and how employees are transitioned into other jobs. That's a big conversation here in Canada. So there is a lot happening in the employment sector. If you're interested and you're thinking about the program, go on to one of the sites. I said Indeed, but there are other job sites. There are climate specific job sites, and you will see the types of jobs that are emerging in local, regional, and federal governments, in local, regional, and national corporations and international corporations. There's too many to actually talk about, but I think you'll start getting a sense that this is a growing area, and it's only going to continue to grow. We're so far behind the 8 ball on mitigating greenhouse gas emissions. There's a lot of impacts that are already locked in, not just today, but for the decades to come. We're going to be, even if we're super aggressive with mitigating climate change, and there's no evidence really of that yet globally. Even if we stopped global emissions tomorrow, there's warming that's locked in, and therefore there are impacts that are locked in for, as I say, decades to come. And so this is unfortunately going to be a growth area for Canada and around the world, for employment and employees who integrate an understanding of climate change, climate adaptation and mitigation, and what to do about it. So I could ramble on, but I feel like I've rambled on enough. You can certainly ask questions about that. I'm not sure what the next slide is, Nancy. So yeah, so here's some examples. Climate adaptation specialist, Indigenous communities, climate adaptation coordinator. And again, these were just pulled one day not a big dive into Indeed.com. Principal environmental assessment and permitting consultant, and within the job description was climate. Senior manager, climate change, greenhouse gas project analyst, so that's on the mitigation side. Policy advisors, managers, actuary directors, and Sun Life. So you can get a sense that these jobs are growing and are across many, many things. So the experience that you bring in, if you're coming from finance, or if you're coming from retail, or if you're coming from education, or you're coming from an environmental background or whatever, the idea with the Climate Action Leadership Program is that you bring that expertise, knowledge, and experience in. You add to it through a deeper understanding of climate and what climate means to the sector you're working in and other sectors, how to address climate change, how to do some of this, very concrete work around risk assessment and resilience planning. And then you take that back out into the world, whether you keep with the job that you're in or you get a different job. I do know from talking, and because I do a lot of research work that's funded by provincial and federal governments, I do know from talking to colleagues in both those settings that they're looking for people, and it's often very difficult to find people. That will change over time as more and more people have an understanding. But this right now, even though it's not early days for climate change, it's kind of early days for people bringing this into the employment sphere, especially on the adaptation side. And so this is the situation right now, is that there's a growing demand for people who have these skills, knowledge, these competencies. One of the things that the program has done is to really it's a competency-informed program. The Micro-Credential I mentioned is also a competency-informed program. One of the benefits of that is that you're encouraged to, on your WordPress site, to build out a professional portfolio that demonstrates the competencies that you have. Those competencies are researched. A project that I had, and that is ongoing, developed a climate adaptation competency framework. We're now changing that to a climate action competency framework, so both mitigation and adaptation. And, there's a lot of interest in that framework nationally. We're talking Infrastructure Canada, for example, around what do those competencies look like in the infrastructure resilience sector. So this is where the world is at. Can you speak a little to decide which grad program? Climate action, environment. Yeah, these are hard decisions. I'm not sure what your name is, but these are hard decisions, and there's ultimately it will be up to you. The climate action program is centered in it's centered on climate action, which is fundamentally inter and transdisciplinary, and fundamentally focused on developing some leadership capacities and an action orientation. I can't speak to the environmental program, and you can talk to admissions advisor about this, but they will incorporate some climate, and there's definitely, obviously, an interest in climate in the environmental programs. Environmental programs have a very specific focus, and you're looking at environmental management, you're looking at natural resource management or environmental education. That's another way to go. The MSc is similar. The MSc is a science-based program. Again, I don't run it, so I can't speak to it, but it's very much a hard science, lab science on the environmental side. I'm not sure if they bring in climate a whole lot into that program. So yeah, I will tell you my take on it. I can't tell you what to do, but climate change is often framed as an environmental problem, and I will say it's not an environmental problem. The environmental problems we're seeing are symptoms of climate change, but climate change is a much more fundamental problem. It's a social, cultural, economic, whatever problem that arises from the systems that we have created and the way that they operate, the economic system, sort of that, neoliberal capitalism, the social systems that we have. And so the Climate Action Leadership Program is really looking at some of those fundamental underlying things. It's not saying, revolution, but saying how do we craft the changes that we need to make, whether they're changes in how we work with natural resources, how we work with nature, how we work with the environment, or how we work with government policies, or how we work in the retail sector, or how we work with tourism. So it has a much broader focus, with climate front and center, and with this social justice lens front and center, this equity lens front and center. So how you decide that is a bit challenging. It's going to depend on what work you want to do at the end. There's no bad master's degree, so you'll get good education regardless. One of the unique things about the Climate Action Program is this embedded flexibility in the second year, with these multiple pathways. Most programs at Royal Roads have a couple of pathways, but particularly the portfolio learning, which really allows you to say, where do I want to focus, and what do I want to do in my career at this point? And how do I shape my learning so that it really addresses that? That's kind of a unique component of the program. And I'm happy to chat with you more one-on-one if you want to reach out. And as I say, the admissions advisors will be able to say something about that as well. But if you want to chat with me, you can also reach out to other program heads in some of those other programs you mentioned. So that's the answer to that, Jay. Yes, you can.
Totally, yeah. And something I'll talk in a few slides too, Robin, is enrollment advisor. They can connect you with students. We don't have any graduate yet, but student can talk to you about the program as well.
Right, and we've had other prospects reach out and chat with some of our students, Nancy, and other students that are in the program. We've got 2 cohorts now, so you can get a sense from them of what they're doing and why they're interested. And I don't know that they'll advise you, but they can certainly share their experience, and you'll get that also, I presume, with the other environmental programs as well that you're thinking about.
And we had a question in the chat about that micro-credential. Someone is mentioning they're doing it, and can they ladder up to the grad diploma and the master?
Exactly. So it's great that you're doing it. Yes, it's the Climate Action Practitioner Foundation Micro-Credential. As it says, it's 4 courses. Each course is 4 weeks long. They're all online, and they're not for credit. They have amazing instructors. We had a lot of people go through them. And so, you know, it's a credential in of itself. You can do that and bring that into the program. If you're doing the diploma only the first year, you can't bring it into the program for credit. There's no space for it. But if you're doing the second year, there is. So anyone that chooses the and we don't have the streams up, but it chooses that practitioner scholar stream, either doing an internship or not doing an internship and doing the full 9 credits. You can bring that in for credit. We'll probably ask you to do graduate level output from the micro-credential, because you don't have to do that for the micro-credential. It's not a part of it, but, you know, and that might be a short paper or a blog that brings in that sort of scholarly lens to what you learned in the micro-credential. So that could be part of your portfolio if you do the second year, and it then counts as credit. 3, as I said earlier, that it was structured in a way that the micro-credential is the equivalent of 3 graduate credits. And yes, you will be able to get this presentation. Nancy, you can answer that while I talk a bit more about the micro-credential. This is just the way it's laid out currently. I mean, it will stay this way, but the micro-credential consists of 2 core courses: Climate Change Adaptation Fundamentals, and it gives you a little bit of science, a little bit about adaptation, and a little bit about mitigation. The Indigenous Knowledges and Perspectives on Climate Action, and both these courses are facilitated by an instructor. It provides another lens on an Indigenous lens on climate. That's another thread in the program. We try and build that Indigenous lens throughout all the courses, because it's such a critical one, both in terms of the fact that, you know, Indigenous communities and nations here in Canada and around the world are on the front line of climate change and are often heavily impacted by climate impacts. And because the knowledge and the wisdom that Indigenous communities hold and Indigenous knowledge holders have is critical to our success in moving forward with climate action. So anyway, you do those 2 courses, and then you've got you're going to choose 2 electives. This suite of electives is growing over the years. This is what we have currently. We actually have now a new leadership course. So we've got 2 leadership courses. One is on transition leadership, and one is on sort of collective approaches to leadership. And this speaks to that idea that, you know, a lot of the work that we're doing in this space has to be collaborative and not siloed. There's policy. We're probably going to have a second policy course. There's a link in there that doesn't work. Communications, there's a climate communications course, and we are likely to be building on another climate communications course. The idea with this will be that you can do these. Right now, these are the courses you can do. You can get a credential that is separate from your degree and put on your CV, your resume. And as I say, you can use it to ladder in, as you can use the graduate certificate in climate risk and resilience. Similarly, that one is actually for credit because it's a graduate certificate. So that's the micro-credential, and I encourage you to take a look at it at the professional and continuing studies. I think, oops, I don't have control here, but oh yeah, I do. You can go to that link and read more about the micro-credential on that link through professional and continuing studies. So
thank you so much, Robin. Yeah, I'll give you a little break if you want to check in the chat. You have done an amazing job at just answering as we go. I think some people have specific questions, and we have Carla here from Enrollment Services answering a few of you, and make sure to connect with us. And I understand if some of you have to go back to work, we'll send you the recording for sure. I have just a few more minutes to do on application details, because some people are asking in the chat about it. So if you're interested to apply, you can do so today. You don't have to wait a specific deadline. You go online on railroads.ca and you will pay that small fee of $131.39. So that will start your online application. Then you will start sharing documents with us. And that's very cool because we just launched a new program, go.rru, and it makes your application even easier. So I've went to the process a few years ago now, but now you have a platform that you can upload all your documents. So we ask official transcripts. So all post-secondary institution you attended in the past, you'll ask them to send us your transcript. You will send a detailed resume. So you'll have to sit down and be like, same thing with your personal statement, really asking yourself why you want to be in the program, and write down all the volunteering work experience you have and school for sure. You will see the requirement, I'll just mention it in a few slides. We ask for some work experience, but it's really important to think of like everything you have done in your life. I know for me, at first I thought I didn't meet the requirement, but as I was thinking of all the jobs I had and all the leadership I had in sometime informal way, it was all adding up to have enough years of experience. So you write down your personal statement. On the website, we have some guidelines, some questions that you can use to write that personal statement. If something went wrong in your past secondary post-secondary institution, like if during your studies something happened, you can use a personal statement to let us know. So it's really for us, for the admission advisor, to understand who you are, where you're coming from. And we ask for 2 letters of reference, one academic and one professional. And what I recommend is that you will write down your personal statement and then share it with your referees so they can understand why you want to apply, and then they can write that letter of reference and send it our way. So all that information is on the website. If you're coming through us, oh, do you want to add something?
I just want to quickly say,
Yeah.
we do ask for academic and professional, but many students come to us without academic, and they may not have done a degree in the last 3 years, and it's like, I have no to ask. Then you do 2 professional. What we don't want is, my mom says I should do this program, or, my best friend. So these are just professional references. If you don't have academic, that's fine, but some students will be coming directly from an academic program.
Yeah, thank you for that. Exactly. And the standard admission will be if you're coming from another institution and you have your 4-year of comparable degree in education, art, science, or what we consider related fields. So that's pretty broad, with a minimum GPA of B. We say B+, but I think on the website we changed it for B, so my apology for that. And we ask for a minimum 3 years of professional experience in a leadership or management position. So this is where I'm asking you to just rethink of everything you have done in your life, because sometimes you might think you don't have that 3 years, and you pretty much maybe have it. So please use your personal statement and your resume to feature that. And if you're not part of that standard admission, don't worry, we have what we call flexible admission. And this is, I don't know the percentage in railroad, I would say almost 50-50. Some come from the kind of traditional path and some from the flexible. So here we ask for an equivalent of 7 years. So you don't have necessarily you can have an undergrad degree or not, but you have that 7 years of work experience in a relevant field, which includes at least 2 years in leadership or management position that is related to the outcome that Robin talked about. And this is mentioned on the website. Oh, and this is mentioned here on the website. I am not sure. I think someone, whoa, fantastic.
A closed system. Hey, I just want to touch on, I know we're over time, but try, if you decide to apply, fill your thing, and don't, if you think, oh, I don't have 7 years of work experience, fill in to the best of your ability and you'll get some feedback. So I've had applications come to me and it's like, well, do they have relevant experience? It's like, I look at it and I go like, absolutely, this is relevant, so and because climate action is so distributed across every sector, sometimes people think, well, I don't have an environmental background. Well, that doesn't matter. You might have a background in accounting. That's really relevant. So, don't limit yourself in that way. And when, as Nancy was saying, when you think about leadership and management, yes, it's great if you have a formal leadership position or a position as a manager or something. Some students will come in with other kinds of leadership experience. Now, I might have been leading the campaign around, an activist campaign. And so you can describe that in your personal statement and give it some context around that.
I totally agree. Thank you so much. And if you're coming through flexible admission, we will require that you take that course that we offer here through Professional and Continuing Studies called Academic Writing and Critical Thinking. And I did it and it was very powerful and I really needed it because I've been away from school for so long. And I think many of you in the chat say the same thing. So being away from school, so that course kind of teach us how to use the APA, again, how to read research paper, like really, it gets us really prepared to jump into the graduate diploma or the master. And this is something that our admission advisor will lead you how to register and how to do that next step. And the key date, I know people were excited, when is the next intake? So you have a year from now, so April 2nd, 2024. You don't have to wait the deadline, but the deadline to apply will be January of next year. If you're ready to apply, we do assessment on a daily basis, daily basis. So we will just see your application. The admission advisor will review it. Sometimes they will communicate with Robin, and then they will send you the letter of acceptance as we go. So you won't have to wait January to know if you're part of the program. You might know it in a few weeks if you have all the paperwork. So don't wait at the last minute, just do it when you're ready. And as you're not a student yet, we mentioned all the beautiful services you can access as a student, but please connect with the financial aid. Some people were asking about loans and grants. So really, this is the website to use. You can print screen or take a picture of that slide here. So you can already connect with financial aid and award to know what can apply to you. We know that going back to school there's a huge component there. So please use that resource here. And as Carla in the chat is telling you, feel free to connect with learn.more at railroads.ca. They can meet with you on Zoom. They can exchange a few emails really to deepen your knowledge on the program, or maybe if you're debating between programs. And I know something we touch base really quickly, and I see many questions about it, is yes, you can do the program and work at the same time. So we are an institution for working professional. I do it. Many people in my cohort do it. So that 15-20 hours a week is manageable as life happen. And I know the instructors are always willing to work with us if we need extra time or anything that we need as life happens, as I said. So I don't know if we want to stay on maybe a few seconds just to answer more questions. And thanks everyone behind the scene. And we hope to see you in the program. Please be in touch.
Thanks, everyone.